Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. Have you ever wondered why so many people aren't Christians? In fact, why are so many people not only not Christians, but vehemently opposed to becoming Christians to the point that they persecute Christians for even mentioning Jesus' name? The answer to that is not profound. It's simple. Human pride. Pride where we think that God, if he exists at all, couldn't possibly have saved us by a carpenter's son who died on a cross. Or pride where we think the message of the cross is too simple to have been from God. That's the answer that Paul gives at the end of 1 Corinthians chapter 1. So if you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. We're going to be reading from verses 18 through 31. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Corinthians chapter 1, beginning at verse 18. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? For since in the wisdom of God the world through wisdom did not know God, it pleased God through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. For Jews request a sign, and Greeks seek after wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, to the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For you see your calling, brethren, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble, are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty, and the base things of the world, and the things which are despised, God has chosen, and the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. But of him you are in Christ Jesus, who became for us wisdom from God, and righteousness, and sanctification, and redemption, that, as it is written, he who glories, let him glory in the Lord. Paul has been writing to the church at Corinth, beginning his letter by telling the brethren that they have a problem. They are factional, and that is leading them away from Christ. The specific thing Paul deals with in our first 4 chapters is division over preachers. What seems to be going on is that in Corinth, some men had risen up in the congregation, either after moving into Corinth or among some who had always lived in Corinth, and were drawing disciples unto themselves. These men were eloquent men, but their focus wasn't on Christ and him crucified. It was on them and whatever message they were preaching. We don't know what that message was, but whatever it was, if it wasn't the message of Christ, it was a false gospel. And following after a false gospel was sinful and would lead to damnation. Now, if the Corinthians had only one of these types of preachers among them, that would be bad enough. But it appears that there were many more, dividing the church into many factions, which was likely the reason that some among them would accept others in sin, because they could have had a preacher who said he was okay, or at least something that could be tolerated. And as long as they were factional over preachers, they were not spiritually mature. They were carnal. And as carnal people often do, they began to trust in their own wisdom, abandoning the simplicity of the gospel, leading them to be no different than the world. When you take a look at the world, many will often think that the message of the cross, salvation in Christ, is foolishness. How could someone dying on a cross remit sins? Why would God send his son to die on the cross to remit sins? Why couldn't he just remit sins on his own? How can one sacrifice have the ability to remit all sins ever committed if one comes to faith in Christ? Why did an all-powerful, all-knowing God do something so simple to save man rather than something more grandiose, maybe like a thundering pronouncement from heaven of salvation on all who come to him in faith? Why? 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 That's the attitude that man has had almost since creation. Why did God forbid me to eat of one tree, Eve thought? I know better than God. I won't die, so I'll eat. Wrong. God knew better. But hasn't the scientist proven through all of our great discoveries that God does not exist and that the Big Bang created everything? How have scientists proven that? Have we witnessed it in our telescopes? Has someone invented a time machine and gone back in time to confirm what we hypothesize today? No. But our observations suggest that what we hypothesize today is correct. And while that may be, my question is, do we have all the information? Is our information correct? Men and women, smart men and women, have hypothesized all sorts of things in the past, even using evidence available to them, and have been proven wrong when new observations come in. Scientists will never prove there isn't a God, because that is unprovable. They will never prove there is a God either, because that too is unprovable. God is spirit, he is not matter. He is not contained in this universe, he is in heaven. Therefore, he cannot be physically observed or unobserved, but his handiwork can be clearly seen. This universe did not come from nothing. It had to have a cause, and the most plausible explanation is an all-powerful, all-knowing God. But wouldn't that God want to be seen? Wouldn't he want to be believed by everyone? And the answer is that God is seen by those who want to see him, which is done through his creation. And that God is believed by those who want to believe him. But for those who don't want to see, who don't want to believe, he will allow them to allow the foolish things of this world to deceive them. He will allow the simplicity of the gospel to blind them. He will allow the wisdom of this world to puff them up into thinking they are smarter than God, more powerful than God, and therefore don't need God. He will allow the cross of Christ to be a stumbling block to those who simply desire to close their eyes and trip. God gave us free will with all the consequences that flow from it, and will thus allow us to use it to either believe or disbelieve. And in the end, if everyone in the world disbelieves, it doesn't matter, for God will destroy the wisdom of the wise and bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Paul is quoting Isaiah 29, verse 14 there, a message spoken by Isaiah to a people that had closed their eyes to the message of God, an action that God allowed them to do to their detriment, but an action that wouldn't change the outcome. That's because the foolishness of God, if there is any, is still wiser than man, and the weakness of God, if there was any, is still stronger than man. And as a result, God chooses foolish things to put to shame the wise, because they will later be proven stupid. And he will use the weak things of this world to put to shame those who are mighty, because they will later be proven to be weak. That's why not many noble, not many wise, not many mighty among this world are called. It's not that God blinds them personally through some sort of predestination. It's that they blind themselves through pride. They allow theories like the Big Bang to convince themselves that there is no God. They allow religious dogma around the Messiah to convince themselves that he couldn't have died on a cross. They allow anything and everything to get in the way instead of humbly submitting to the message of the cross. In the case of the Corinthians, they were allowing the eloquence of preachers to convince them of other doctrines than the doctrines of Christ which Paul taught them. And what's worse, they gloried in their so-called wisdom and spiritual maturity in doing so. The problem is, if they continued on this path, they too would be put to shame by the power of God. If they wanted to glory in something, glory in the Lord. Glory in the salvation brought by Jesus through the cross. Glory in God's power in establishing his church. Glory in God and God alone. Paul is quoting Jeremiah 9, verse 24, when he says this, a message originally spoken by Jeremiah to a people that were full of themselves as well. Some things never change. They didn't in Paul's day, and they don't today either. The message of the cross isn't in fact foolish. It is the power of God, but it is only a power of God to those who believe, because they're the only ones going to be saved by it. That's not God's fault. It's ours. Knowing this, let's humble ourselves in the sight of the Lord. Let's allow him to lift us up through faith in Christ. Let's be saved today. With that, our time is up for today. Tomorrow is Labor Day in Ontario, Canada, so we will be taking a one-day break and return, the Lord willing, on Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. When we return, we hope you'll join us for our discussion of 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 1 to 5, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.